Can someone tell me if I am audible? Okay, excellent. So, and you can see my slides as well. Can you see my slides? No, sir. You can't see my slides now? All right, let me try once more. Now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. So we have talked briefly about the active elements of a successful petroleum system, conventional successful petroleum system. And today and next class and maybe another day, we will mostly concentrate on source rock and different elements associated with source rock. Not particularly maybe source rock, but somehow they are related to source rock and very much related to the generation of hydrocarbon. Okay. So today's topic of discussion will be carbon cycle, organic matter, and its maturation. So why is carbon cycle so important for us? Okay. So carbon has numerous ways of bonding with many other elements, particularly oxygen and hydrogen. You know about that. It forms organic matter. It can also form inorganic compounds. Now, organic compounds which are formed with carbon are generally considered as unstable, okay, in the biosphere because they are generally in the reduced state. And we have free oxygen in the atmosphere. So if it is in the reduced, if it comes in contact with the oxygen, it actually degrades, right? Hence, the organic form of carbon is generally considered unstable. On the other hand, inorganic compounds, principally like calcite, dolomite. So calcite is CaCO3 and dolomite is CaMgCO3 whole twice, right? Are stable because they are in the oxidized state. Okay, so inorganic carbon compounds are generally stable, and the organic carbon compounds are generally unstable. Carbon is contained in most substances that are vital for the development of life, and they are called biomolecules, and they are generally expressed in terms as proteins, lipids, carbohydrates. In every biomolecule, you do find carbon in one form, right? So another important thing that forms a source rock, which we call as planktons. Let us little bit look at a plankton. So plankton is the main source of oil and gas. Okay, plankton is the basic material which actually after their life they get deposited in the sea bottom, and that is what makes the most prolific hydrocarbon. Okay, there are other sources from which hydrocarbon also generates. As you have seen, we have talked about type 1, type 2, and type 3 of source rocks. In type 3, as you have seen, it comes from land plants, right? So there are other sources of hydrocarbon as well, but plankton is one of the most prolific sources which actually generate hydrocarbon. Okay, so diatoms are important group of phytoplanktons. They contain silica skeleton and may reach all the way up to 1 millimeter in diameter. And other phytoplankton organisms have carbonate skeletons. Okay, so the phytoplankton either can have a silica skeleton or carbonate skeleton. I'm sure you must have read about these things, but I'm still refreshing a little bit. And then zooplanktons include planktonic foraminifera, radiolaria, and planktonic crustaceans. Okay, so they all have carbon in them, and when they die, essentially they can form very prolific source rock. But you can see the planktons are very tiny organisms. Okay, so one plankton or two planktons or a plankton, present in a bowl will not essentially form significant of amount of hydrocarbons. So you need to have a boom of planktons, and such pictures you can see in present day as well. Yeah. So this is Nova Scotia and this is Newfoundland, and you can see here within the sea you have this beautiful white colored stuff that you can even see from a satellite. Yeah, and this is what refers to a planktonic boom. Yeah, and such bloom essentially, if it is really extensive, when they die, they settle in the sea bottom and then immediately get covered by other sediments. Why it is important to cover them with other sediments? Because you want to keep them in the reduced state. Yeah, if they are calm, if they can, if they can, if they're churned and come in contact with the atmospheric oxygen, then immediately the carbon will be oxidized, right? And you will not be able to generate hydrocarbon out of it. On the other hand, the carbon will be transformed to carbon dioxide and released away. Okay, so that is something you don't want. You want to keep an anoxic environment present. Okay, so as soon as you actually bury these phytoplankton bloom, or sorry, in general, these planktonic blooms, then what your immediate the nature has to play a role. There must be an immediate set of deposition of some sort of rocks, maybe shell, that actually covers these planktonic blooms, and then it allows it to maintain the anoxic environment, right? So now let us look at the carbon cycle. So what is carbon cycle? Carbon cycle is essentially the movement of carbon in the form of carbon dioxide or any other form from atmosphere to the hydrosphere, yeah, to the lithosphere, to the biosphere, and then completing the cycle. Okay, so it's the interaction from the biosphere with the atmosphere, then atmosphere to the biosphere, from biosphere to the lithosphere, from lithosphere to the biosphere, and vice versa, and then from the atmosphere to the hydrosphere, and then from hydrosphere to the atmosphere. So, and there are multiple processes, and you can read about carbon cycle, and I'm sure you have read about carbon cycle in details in your introduction to earth science classes. I'm sure you have read about them. If not, you will read them in one of the classes in details. But there are few things I want to highlight here, that as there is this cycle established in nature, the total carbon budget is kind of maintained, right? So whatever is kind of being released in the atmosphere gets back to the lithosphere and biosphere and also the hydrosphere. So there is a balance maintained, right? Now, whatever carbon is exposed with the with the free oxygen, okay, that gets oxidized, right? And CO2 is released. So the carbon which is of our interest, the carbon that will generate hydrocarbon, yeah, which is the fossil pool, as you can see here, okay, uh, must escape from the carbon cycle, right? That must escape from the carbon cycle. So organic matter, without being oxidized, deposited with clay, buried, forms the source rock. I hope you got the point. As we have giving you an example. For example, the story of planktons. So the planktons generate the carbons that they have. Sorry, intake the carbon that they have either from the atmosphere or from the hydrosphere, right? That comes to the biosphere in terms of the planktons, right? And then the planktons will die and form a layer beneath the sea, right? And then If you keep them uncovered, what will happen? They will be churned, maybe come out to the toxic environment, to the very top part of the ocean, and get oxidized, right? But that is something you don't want. What you have to do, you have to cut off that carbon from this carbon cycle, so that you cut off the source of the oxygen being exposed on these phytoplankton, right? So that is something that nature plays a role, and there is a very quick deposition of, say, for example, clay on the top of the phytoplankton, on the plankton bloom, and then immediately the oxygen supply is cut off, right? Now, and the values that are given here are expressed in GTC per year. GTC means gigaton per year. Okay, and as I said, in a normal, without any anthropogenic activities being in there, there is a beautiful balance which is maintained, right? A beautiful balance which is maintained. Now you can see that fossil fuel, cement, land use changes, whatever anthropogenic changes we impart upon the earth, that contributes to around 9 gigaton per year of carbon dioxide being released in the atmosphere. Okay, or carbon being released in the atmosphere. Okay, which not all the 9 of it is kind of stays in the atmosphere. Some part of it, due to the nature, kindness of the nature, also gets trapped in the carbon cycle again. But then the nature is not efficient enough to take everything out. But then there is still a surplus of 4 gigaton of carbon that is essentially being present, is a surplus carbon which is present in the atmosphere, which causes essentially all sorts of problems that we are currently dealing with in terms of greenhouse gases and carbon related aerosol problems, you name it, black carbon problem, everything. So this 4 gigaton of carbon is something that, as environmental scientists, you have to have a responsibility to reduce, right? Because you somehow will not be able to reduce this. Maybe you will be able to reduce this, but the chances are slim until you have a good alternative for fossil fuel, that we have talked about it before as well. So that surplus carbon which comes into the atmosphere is something to be worried of, right? So where most of the carbon resides in general, is it in the atmosphere? Unfortunately not. Most of the carbon that is present in the nature is still in its inorganic form, and are present as carbonate rocks, right? The carbonate rocks that you have all seen in your perhaps in your introduction to geology lab classes. Okay, right. And you have heard about carbonate rocks, of course, in your introduction to geology classes. Or those who have done sedimentology know more about carbonates. So those who don't know, generally carbonates are of two types, calcite and dolomite, as we said. Calcite is calcium carbonate, CaCO3, and dolomite is CaMgCO3 whole twice, which is dolomite. Of course, you don't generally find dolomite in nature. Dolomite is generally formed by the dolomitization process, that is the replacement of, of calcium ion by the magnesium ion. The process is called dolomitization. Okay, and you don't generally see the dolomite being deposited somewhere naturally. Okay, it is always a replacement kind of reaction. So the biomolecules present in so we are not essentially interested from a source rock point of view on those carbonates, right? Because we will mostly concentrate on the inorganic carbon. That is what is more interesting for us in terms of characterization of a source rock, right? So the biomolecules in living organisms can be broadly subdivided. Of our interest can be broadly subdivided into 4 lipids. Okay, you know about it. Lipids are mostly fats, oils, waxes, and they have the greatest potential to be hydrocarbon sources, right? And they are combinations of fatty acids and glycerol, okay, and then also glycerides. Okay, they generally form the total lipid group. Okay, and those who are very good with organic geochemistry, of course, organic chemistry will appreciate their chemical formulas and chemical reactions much more than I do. Okay, so and then proteins, and of course you know about proteins are giant molecules that make up solid constituents of animal tissues and plant cells. Okay, they are rich in carbon, but contain substantial amount of nitrogen, sulfur, and oxygen as well. Then carbohydrates are based on sugars, of course, and you know the general formula of carbohydrates: glucose, sucrose, fructose. The value of N essentially changes. C6H12O6. We all know is the formula of glucose, and then if we keep on increasing the value of N, it changes from glucose to sucrose and fructose and whatever, right? And they are polymers that forms like cellulose, starch, and chitins. Yeah, they are all the polymers of sugars, right? And they are common in plant tissues. And then there is another thing which we call as lignin. Lignin is a polymer consisting of numerous aromatic rings, and it is the major constituent of land plants and converts to coal through deoxygenation process. We will talk about what is deoxygenation later on, of course, but for the timing, remember that we will discuss in details about coal later on. But then lignin is also another biomolecule which we are interested in, other than lipid, protein, and carbohydrate. Lignin is special because it generally creates coal, but then it can also generate a little bit of gas as well. Not the very good quality gas, but it can still generate some gas that we can use. Okay, but lipids are most important for us, and lipids are major source of oil. Okay, so if your source rock is rich in lipid, or your kerogen is rich in lipid, that makes the source rock fantastic precursor of an oil source rock. Now let us see the average composition of these different biomolecules in weight percentages. Okay, you can see here lipid, and then carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen, which we are mostly interested in. Okay, then protein, carbohydrate, lignin, and then you can compare that with petroleum. Okay, now if you compare these individual biomolecules with petroleum, what you will observe that lipids are closest to the petroleum composition, right? So you can see here carbon is around 76 weight percentage in lipid in general, okay? And then in petroleum, it's around 83 to 87%. So there means there is a carbonization process that happens, okay? So if you think about that if source rock is predominantly rich in lipid, okay, then if it generates petroleum, there is a carbonization process happens. That means the relative percentage of carbon essentially increases when it forms petroleum from a lipid compound. Okay, but they are richer in oxygen and carbon. Okay, lipids have closest composition, but they're richer in oxygen and poorer in carbon. Okay, so the petroleum is of course richer in carbon. Yeah, and then there is, as you can see here, the oxygen weight percentage has decreased. So this is what we call as oxygenization process. That means the relative percentage of oxygen actually decreases while lipid actually forms petroleum. Okay, so the hydrogen percentage more or less stays the same, but oxygen essentially decreases drastically, and hence you can see the relative percentage of carbon actually increases. So it's not that the carbon by itself in absolute amount increases, but because the total amount of oxygen essentially decreases, and then sulfur decreases, nitrogen decreases, and as a result, the relative percentage of carbon increases in a petroleum. So where would you actually see most of the phytoplanktons to bloom? So this is this is called the shelf of a. So this is where my land is, and this is the deep sea. Okay. This is land, this is deep sea, and this is, as you know, this is called a shelf, and this is called a slope, right? If not, maybe I'm sure you have read about shelf and slope in your introduction to earth science class as well. So the very initial part where the while you transit from the land to the sea, there is a gently sloping part which we call shelf, and then there is the steeply dipping part before it actually reaches the abyssal plain or the deep sea. The deep sea floor, there is something called slope, which is steeply dipping, right? So where do you find the phytoplankton blooming happening? This is generally happens very close to the land actually, because that is where you have most of the nutrients present, right? And you see in the shelf area you have a the presence of a organic rich phytoplankton zone. Is there a questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah,
So in the previous slide,
yeah. Who is asking? I don't see who is
Sir
asking.
Shivangi,
Yeah, Shivangi, go ahead. In the previous slide.
sir, I can get the trends that you explained right now, like how the oxygen is decreasing and how the sulfur is increasing and how it is causing the effect on the carbon. I don't get it at all. So can you explain it once more?
Okay. I will explain about the oxygenization process later on. For the timing, what I'm trying to explain here, you can see here carbon is 76%, right? And oxygen is 12%, okay? And then what you see here in the petroleum product, so this is in lipid, 76, 12, and 12, right? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But then in petroleum, what we see that carbon has increased. Relative percentage of carbon has increased. The hydrogen is more or less the same, but the oxygen has decreased. Okay. So while lipid gets cooked, okay, and petroleum forms, what happens that the whatever oxygen is present in the atomic structure leaves out of the system. Okay, it no more remains in the biomolecule. It no more remains in the kerogen. Okay, so what happens if I remove one part of the system, right? If I remove the oxygen from it, and if this total things forms 100%, then obviously I will enhance the percentage of carbon, right? So hence it gets enriched with carbon. That's all I said.
Okay, sir. So you explained the difference, like why the lipid is 76, but still the petroleum has 83 to 87%, right? That you
Yeah,
tried to
because
explain.
it's the relative percentage, na?
Okay, yes, sir.
If you have taken out, so you have like so in the lipid you have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. For the timing, let us just consider these three. Okay, so carbon contains
Sir, what I
76%.
want to ask is,
Yeah,
uh, in lipid, the carbon content was 76, but in the petroleum, it went to 83 to 87. This
yeah,
happened because deoxygenization process takes place, due
yeah.
to which this carbon content in the petroleum increased. That is what you want to explain?
Yeah, the carbon essentially doesn't increase. Okay, the absolute value of carbon is still the same, but because the oxygen goes
Okay.
out of the system, yeah, hence the relative percentage of carbon increases.
Okay, sir, got it. Relative content is going to increase.
Sorry,
Yeah.
the relative
Yes, sir.
percentage increases. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Okay, what was the question? You had another question. What are the factors causes dolomitization? Well, I this is not exactly the class to discuss dolomitization. But what I recommend that you study it by yourself for the timing. One of the things that is very much important to consider dolomitization is essentially the amount of magnesium input. So the seawater, where essentially this sort of transformation happens, must have a sudden surge of magnesium. Why such sudden surge of magnesium happens? There must be a certain temperature being present. Some people say some bacteria change calcite to dolomite. Okay? So I know this is a half-hearted answer, but this is not exactly the forum to discuss dolomitization. So, but I will recommend that you read any sedimentology book and you will get a better answer. But for the timing, very briefly, it's the temperature, it's the amount of magnesium present, and maybe the work of bacteria. Okay, these are the things which are primarily responsible for converting calcite to a dolomite, right?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. So it's an environment where I need light, water, because I have to have the nutrients present as well for the planktons to actually flourish, and then there must be a lack of circulation, and an anoxic condition must prevail as well, so that my planktonic bloom can actually convert to a potential source rock. Okay, so the total carbon content in the Earth's crust is around 9 into 10 to the power 19 kilograms. Okay. The hydro and biosphere contains less than 10 to the power 10 to the power minus 5 parts of this. Okay? Significantly less than the total carbonate. Over 80% of this is in carbonates, right? Organic carbon amounts to 1.2 into 10 to the power 19 kg and is distributed approximately as follows. So the organic carbon, I'm not talking about the inorganic carbon right now, okay? Only the organic carbon. Dispersed in sedimentary rocks, almost 97%. Petroleum in non-reservoir rocks, around 2%. So these essentially, this 97%, which will form my petroleum source, right? This is my petroleum source, the first 97%. Petroleum in non-reservoir rocks, 2%. Coal and peat, 0.13%. Petroleum in reservoirs, 0.01%. Okay, so this is essentially your source rock, and this is essentially your reservoir rock. Okay, so you can see what a insignificant amount of the total organic carbon. I mean, what a insignificant amount of total organic carbon is present there if you consider the total carbon that is present in the atmosphere, biosphere, and lithosphere, right? And then within that itself as well, how insignificant amount of carbon actually converts into petroleum that is present in the reservoir. So this is really, really insignificant. Okay, but still it is enough for us to have survived for such long. Okay, now we have introduced the concept of total organic carbon, but then let us talk about it a little more as well. So if a rock contains significant amount of organic carbon, it is a possible source rock for petroleum or gas, for oil or gas. Okay, the TOC content is a measure of the source rock's potential and measured with total pyrolysis. Okay, so pyrolysis is a process by which you can actually separate the from a rock, you can separate the organic matter. And yeah, and it is present in many of the earth science departments who works in organic geochemistry. Unfortunately, we don't have one, but you can find one in IIT Bombay, and they do it almost like a everyday job. Okay, so you have a piece of rock and you can take out the amount of organic carbon present in that. Okay. The table shows how total organic carbon in weight percentage relates to the source rock quality. So if the weight percentage is 0 to 0.5, we call it a poor quality source rock. If it is 0.5 to 1, we call it a fair quality source rock. 1 to 2, it's a good quality source rock. 2 to 4, it's a very good quality source rock. And if the total organic carbon is more than 4 weight percentage, then we say it's an excellent quality source rock. Now, generally, fine-grained sediments contain more organic matter than coarser-grained ones because of the restricted diffusion, and thus lower amount of oxygen can come with the organic matter, and TOC can reach all the way up to 20% or more. Coals and oil-rich shells are organic matter, but are called source rock. Okay? So what I just said, that we already have touched upon it while we were talking about elements of petroleum system, and we said that one of the most important source rock is shell. It's not a sandstone. Okay, why not a sandstone? Because sandstone has porosity and permeability. Okay, so first thing, due to mechanical processes by which your sandstone actually forms, yeah, by, for example, transportation, a lot of sorting, too much exposure on the current and wave. Okay, whatever organic carbon is there kind of gets segregated. Okay, that is number 1 point. Number 2 point, if it is fine grained, then only you can kind of conceal whatever organic matter is there within your pore spaces. Okay, so hence this organic rich this shell, because of them being fine grained, they can conceal these organic matter within their pore spaces so that it doesn't come in direct contact with oxygen. Okay, and hence it restrains itself from being oxygenated, because if it gets oxygenated, it will not create a hydrocarbon, right? And the total organic carbon can reach all the way up to 20%. So coal and oil shell, yeah, oil shells are the shells which will actually form oil in later on. Yeah, are excellent some source rock. Okay, now you can see here what has been given in. So this is a typical picture, reflected light picture of a typical source rock. Yeah, and you can see you can see the organic matter being inscribed within the very fine pore space of the rock. Okay? And here what we can see, organic carbon is plotted against produced hydrocarbon in ppm. Okay, and you can see here with respect to different types of shells how this varies. Okay, so you can see essentially here that there is a general trend of increment. Okay, if I have a higher amount of organic carbon, it will the expulsion of hydrocarbon will be more. Okay, for some of like for example black shell, black shell are called black shell because it is extremely organic rich. You can see here it has almost 10 weight percentage of total organic carbon. Yeah, very high total organic carbon. It's an excellent source of total organic carbon, as you can see, and consequently it also expels a lot of hydrocarbon. Yeah, in terms of ppm, parts per million, how much hydrocarbon comes parts per million. Okay, and similarly you can see here where does coal stand. Yeah, some of the coals are also produces a lot of hydrocarbon, but generally you can understand that such coals are generally produces gas. Okay, you can see some of the sandstones also producing hydrocarbon, but they are very special stories. We will discuss about them later on. Okay, but in general, sandstones are not good source rocks. Okay, hence you can see they do not actually fall in the trend. Okay, they don't essentially fall in the trend. So there are some exceptional cases where sandstone do produce hydrocarbon. And these are other important shells that are present in the world, and people have done such empirical studies to relate the expelled hydrocarbon amount with the total organic carbon present in the rock. Okay. So now EOC in a sedimentary rock can be divided into two types. One we call as bitumen. Bitumen is the fraction that is soluble in organic solvents like chloroform. Okay. And then kerogen, and kerose stands for wax, and that is the insoluble part or the non-extractable residue that forms in the transformation from organic matter. Okay. So kerogen is an intermediate product that formed during the diagenesis and is the principal source of hydrocarbon generation. Okay, and you will see that the bitumen is essentially the part that will form your coal. Okay, and kerogen is the stuff which is insoluble, will essentially form your hydrocarbon. So you have a organic matter which is completely uncooked, just deposited. And then you have another end member, which is your oil and gas, which is after it gets cooked. And the intermediate step is your kerogen. The intermediate step is both your kerogen and bitumen. Bitumen will essentially form coal, and kerogen will form your oil and gas. Okay? And kerogen is a complex mixture of high weight organic molecules with a general composition of C12, H12, ON.16X. Okay, so it can with X you can understand that it has a variety of composition, and it's a very complex mixture, because as you can imagine that it will depend on many things. What will be the actual composition of the kerogen, whether this is lipid rich, whether it is protein rich, whether it is lignin rich, whether it is carbohydrate rich, and what amount of carbohydrate to protein is there, what amount of protein to um, fat is there, right? And then within that itself also, what type of lipid, what type of protein, what type of carbohydrate is there. So the source rock is varied, hence the product that is formed from the uh, by the deoxygenation process is of also varied, right? But this is essentially the intermediate product between the organic matter and the hydrocarbon. Okay, so the composition of kerogen. So I can put them in a simple, beautiful triangular plot. So this is 100% carbon. This is 100% hydrogen, and sorry, this is 30% hydrogen. This is 30% oxygen. Okay, 100% carbon, 30% hydrogen, 30% oxygen. Yeah, and that means this in here this will be 70% of carbon. Okay, and then you can see here this essentially is my bitumen part. Okay, so anthracite, this is the organic matter that will form coal. You can see anthracite, bituminous, lignite. Okay, these are the different varieties of coal. And here is my oil. Yeah, and yeah, and of course if we are more towards hydrogen part, more towards hydrogenated, then we will see formation of gas as well. Okay, maturation, the principal condition is that this conversion takes place. So you know what is maturation. So we have this organic matter that needs to transform from the organic matter to kerogen, and then subsequently to hydrocarbon, right? Then I have to expose that organic matter to that particular depth of burial, and that depth of burial will relate to a particular temperature window. We talked about it, about oil window and gas window in our active petroleum system class. Okay, so that conversion, the principal condition of this conversion takes place essentially in an oxygen, in an anoxic environment. Okay, from the very beginning of this process. Okay, so on burial, first kerogen is formed. This is gradually cracked to smaller hydrocarbons, I mean small chain hydrocarbons, with the formation of CO2 and H2O as other byproducts. Okay, and at higher temperature, methane is formed. Methane is CH4, as you know. Yeah, and then hydrocarbons form from C13 to C30 numbers. Okay, so methane, ethane, propane, butane. You know, CH4 is C is 1, right? And then products all the way up to C13, and from C13 to C30 actually forms, and this C13 to C30 is actually present in oil. Okay, now methane, ethane, propane, butane, they are all gases, as you know. Okay. So initially you have the formation of single chain hydrocarbons, and then of course the chain gets longer. Okay. Consequently, the carbon content of kerogen increases with increasing temperature, and this is called carbonization process. Simultaneously, fluid products high in hydrogen are formed and oxygen is eliminated. So, and this is what we call as the deoxygenization process. Okay, so the amount of carbon increases. So carbonization happens, hydrogenization happens, but deoxygenization happens while we do this reaction of forming from total organic carbon to kerogen to hydrocarbon. Okay, and initially we formed smaller hydrocarbons like methane. Okay, and then with increase in temperature, you start forming hydrocarbons with C13 and C30. But we don't worry about this right now. Just remember that methane forms first, and then the higher order hydrocarbons forms later on. But we will talk about oil chemistry and gas chemistry in greater details in subsequent classes. Okay. So dehydrogenization and carbonization, that is essential for coal formation. Okay, this is the formation of coal. This is not the formation of hydrocarbon. So that is what happens in coal. Dehydrogenation. That means the hydrogen goes out of the system, and carbonization. That means carbon increases of the organic source material that can be illustrated by H by C ratio during the formation of coal. So this is wood, which actually essentially will form peat to lignite to bituminous coal to anthracite. We will discuss about coal in detail later on, but for the time being, remember that it is the low quality coal, then comes lignite, then comes bituminous, then comes anthracite. And as we come from wood to peat to lignite to bituminous coal to anthracite, what we observe that the hydrogen to carbon ratio essentially increases. So amount of hydrogen to carbon ratio essentially decreases. So hydrogen leaves out of the system, the carbon increases. Okay, this is during the formation of coal. Okay, and hence hydrogenization and carbonization are the two basic processes that operates while formation of coal. On the other hand, while we see about talk about hydrocarbon generation, that is oil and gas, what are the major processes? Deoxygenization. So hydrogen remains more or less constant. Nothing happens to the, not nothing, but there is no significant change in the amount of hydrogen present. In the weight percentage of the hydrogen, but oxygen leaves out of the system and it gets more enriched in carbon, right? So organism, and then kerogen. So this is TOC, organic matter, then kerogen, and then petroleum. And as we can see, as we move from organism to kerogen to petroleum, we see that the oxygen to carbon ratio essentially decreases. So that means the amount of the relative percentage of oxygen also decreases while formation of petroleum. So what is the fundamental difference between the formation of coal and formation of hydrocarbon? One is associated with deoxygenization and carbonization, and the other one, the coal formation, is associated with dehydrogenization and carbonization. Okay. So we have talked about, about this particular diagram. Okay, we have discussed about it: type 1, type 2, and type 3 source rocks. And you can see here hydrogen to carbon ratio is plotted against oxygen to carbon ratio is plotted. Yeah, and then we said type 1 forms excellent quality of light oil. Okay, and then type 2 and type 3. Okay, now we know about this. Now, what happens with respect to maturity? We can see. We will talk this one in details when we talk about coal. But if you just want to compare about the qualification process and then the same for hydrocarbon generation process, we can see rank: lignite, subbituminous, high volatile bituminous, medium volatile bituminous, low volatile bituminous, semi-anthracite, and anthracite. That happens while we go with more maturity of the coal, more cooking of the coal. And then this is the amount of calorific value, how much, if you burn a certain percentage of coal, how much energy you can produce. And this is the VM percentage. You can see with With more maturity, I'm increasing my calorific value, but with more maturity, I'm decreasing my VM, means volatile matter. Yeah. So the amount of volatile matter, the amount of fluid present in a coal essentially goes away with the increase in coal rank. Okay. LOM is a specific type of organic matter. We will discuss that later on. Clay mineralogy. So if we subject a clay with the same type of pressure and temperature, while coal forms, smectite turns into a mixed layer of smectite and illite, then illite forms, and with more pressure and temperature, the chlorite actually forms. Okay, and with the same pressure and temperature, if we have a different organic system, organic matters. Okay, in the early diagenesis, we see the formation of methane and then oil, then condensate and wet gas, and at the high temperature in the catagenetic methane as well. Okay, so what I'm trying to explain with this slide, that here, say for example, I have bitumen as the primary source rock. Here I have the normal clay, and here I have kerogen. Okay, and then I am subjecting them to the same pressure and temperature, which is increasing with my increase in rank, right? And I see, if I compare the same pressure and temperature, I will see, depending on the organic matter, something will form lignite, and then on the if we do it with kerogen, it will form methane, right? And similarly, if we try and see the clay, whatever is present there, it will be mostly forming smectites, right? Okay. And while oil will form, I will see at the same pressure and temperature, I will form high volatile bituminous. Okay, and then if I compare that with clay mineralogy, it will form illite. So that is something. So I just want to compare the change in organic matter in coal and petroleum system, how it changes with what is the analogous, yeah, in the same depth range. Now, this is essentially in the y-axis depth is plotted in kilometers, and in the x-axis temperature is plotted. So this is one geothermal gradient, which is 20 degrees centigrade per kilometer. This is another geothermal gradient, which is 50 degrees centigrade per kilometer. I'm sure you know what is geothermal gradient is. Yeah, and you can see here at say around 2 kilometer depth, I formed heavy oil. At 3 kilometer depth, I start forming lignite, which is a type of coal, and at the same depth, I start forming oil and gas. In the 3 kilometer depth, I start forming around light oil and gas. Then, in a little bit higher depth, I form subbituminous, around 150 degree, mostly gas. If I cross 150, high volatile bituminous, low volatile bituminous, and then 200 degree centigrade only gas, right? So, how, with respect to depth and temperature, the formation of coal and the formation of oil and gas changes? The processes are generally the same. In one case it is hydrogenization, and in the other one it is deoxygenization. Yeah? And in one case I have like a bitumen type of source rock, okay, and then in the other one we have kerogen type of organic matter. One forms oil and gas, and the other forms coal, but it goes through similar kind of maturity process. Okay, now this is a very important slide. What you can see here, if I now essentially convert the information on depth and temperature into ages, okay, so what I am observing, that if my source rock is of Jurassic age, that is when I see peak generation of oil and gas. Okay, it doesn't mean that we will not be able to see, if the source rock is tertiary, no generation of oil and gas. But if a source rock is of Jurassic age, yeah, I will see that it has the most potential of forming oil and gas. Okay, but then if it is older than Jurassic, So if I ask you if I find a source rock which is of Precambrian age, okay, which is of Proterozoic age, what is the chances of that particular source rock of having enough, I mean, expelling enough hydrocarbon? It perhaps had expelled once upon a time, but then it has right now it has burned. Okay, so it will not be there in a active petroleum system. Okay, so because the depth of burial is very intricately related with the age, hence you can correlate the depth of burial and hence temperature with the with their corresponding ages. All right. So how do I know about what sort of whether this particular source rock is mature enough or not? I do two things, and I talked about vitrinite reflectance index. How do you measure that in our earlier class? So one of them is vitrinite reflectance. You see you take out a particular organic or a kerogen or a bitumen, which we call as vitrinite, and then you study its reflectance. If the reflectance between 0.15 to 0.5 to 1.3, we say that it is perhaps in the oil window. If it is more than that, it is more than 2, we say that it is completely over matured. And if it is less than 0.2, 0.3, then we say it is under matured. Okay, it's not matured enough. Okay, and if it is more than 2, we say it is completely gone out of the window. Okay, so we will not be able to. So to the optimized values of vitrinite reflectance for oil is 0.5 to 1.3. Similarly, there is something called thermal alteration index. So measures the color of finely dispersed organic matter on a scale to scale from 1, which is pale yellow, to 5, which is black. So you can see here, this is maybe pale yellow, which is 1, and which is black is like 5. The index has pore sensitivity within the oil window, around 2.5 to 3, but it is not and is not generally used. Okay, the more important this thermal alteration index was generally used before. Right now, people mostly use vitrinite reflectance. Okay. So purposes of maturation indicators like vitrinite reflectance index and then TAI are to recognize and evaluate potential source rocks for oil and gas by measuring their contents in organic carbon and their thermal maturities, to correlate oil types with probable source beds through their geochemical characteristics and optical properties of kerogen in source beds, to determine the time of hydrocarbon generation, migration, and accumulation, and to estimate volume of hydrocarbons generated, thus assesses the possible reserves and losses of hydrocarbons in the system. Okay. All right. So I will stop here and see if you have any question. And we will continue with the discussion in the next class, where we will talk more about the chemistry of oil. Please ask if you have a question. Let's see, I have to pick now. Will the quiz include today's lecture also? No, it will not. But listening to the lecture will not perhaps be sufficient to answer the quiz. Okay, you have to read books. Anyone else? Any other question other than the quiz on the class that we have on the content that we have discussed in today's class? Okay, tell me everyone is your registration on the course been successful? Can I just send the quiz to the email IDs that are registered right now? Is everyone registered? Can you just confirm with me? I know for fourth year and fifth year, it's no problem. I have to just to confirm with third year. Is it, could you all register yourself to the course?
Yes, sir. We are confirmed now in Shiksha. We have been updated.
Okay, excellent. So I can essentially take the email IDs from there, na? No problem.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good. Any other question you have on the course today? Nirul, you have any question? Or was everything clear?
So it was clear. I have to also look that previous lecture also, like that trap one that you
You
have
have not.
pre-recorded. Sir, I have seen that trap lecture. So I have trap pre-recorded lecture, and like how we are getting how can we extract from the traps, or if we can't extract from the trap, like.
No, you will drill a well, na, there. We will talk about drilling later on in a greater details. For the time being, remember, you will drill a well. So it is like
Yes, sir.
creating a hole. So you will create a hole from the ground to the till and touch the reservoir, okay, and then pump
Yes,
the oil and gas out.
sir. So
Okay,
for
that is how we
different,
extract.
sir, so for different traps, we might have different techniques, or is not like that.
Well, fundamentally they are similar, but then yes, the minute details do vary depending on traps.
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Sudeep, was it clear for you, Sudeep?
Yes, sir.
Was it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right. So if you don't have any question, I will stop it here. And yeah, look forward seeing your quizzes. And I'll see you tomorrow. So before after 5 o'clock, I will not entertain any other quiz answers. Huh? Make sure that you submit it by 5 o'clock tomorrow.